Hello. Hope you guys can hear me. If you can, please help me confirm that you can hear me. I'd like to know if you can hear me well. Hello. Hope you guys can hear me. Okay, so yeah, let me get started. Now, yeah, greetings everyone. Hope you're doing great and I hope you are taking good care of yourselves. Welcome to this video. I honestly wasn't planning on making this series at any point. Why? Because I had an understanding that most people out there, or most people who actually watch this channel specifically, have an understanding of the Django web framework. I don't know if my webcam, which is the laptop webcam, is working well. Please tell me if that works well, if you can see me very well. Well, for background noise, I'm not sure if there's so much I can do about that because this is not a video I'm editing or something like that. And even the noise settings of the software I'm using require too much to set up. But I think you guys can hear me. So yeah, my voice is too low. Let me see what to do about that. Let me see what to do about that. Maybe adjust my gain a little bit. Can you guys hear me well? What of now? Can you hear me now? Let me try again. All right, so yeah, hope you guys are watching me. If you are watching me, please try to tell me if I'm loud and clear. Now, my voice has been a little bit low. I have been having some trouble both on Linux and in Windows. So, yeah. For background noise, I think what I'm going to do is to set something up here in OBS. Let me just set it up real quick. I think it's under filters and then under, oh, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Please, if you can hear me, kindly leave me a comment telling me something about the audio, because that's what I'm really worried about. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, now I can confirm that you guys can hear me. Let's get started. I will be playing the chat this side down in on my phone. But if you can, kindly tell me something about the status of the stream. And yeah, we are live. So yeah, I wanted to get on here and basically make a very simple beginner guide on Django. The reason as to why I'm doing this is because I have been teaching for the past 2 weeks. I've been teaching Django to students who are getting started with the framework, and I thought it would be good for me to actually make some resource they could look at, something that they could have even when I'm away from them, because the guys I'm teaching Django are like 400 500 kilometers away from where I stay. So yeah, now let us get started. So what I'm going to do is to make this presentation go up. So yeah, welcome to the Django for Beginners tutorial series, or let's say a guide, which is going to be a series for the absolute beginner. The absolute beginner to Django should at least have an understanding of Python. So that's the assumption I'm making for this series of videos. And I'll try as hard as I can to dumb things down and make things a little bit easy to understand. So I'm going to be switching off my webcam, but I'll do that after this entire presentation. I will start with just introducing myself. My name is Ali Jonathan. For those who are new, this is my YouTube channel where I teach programming, but mostly from what I currently know, and I keep learning and I keep to share my knowledge with others. And I've started doing that in the real world. So last week, just like I was saying, I was in Arua, which is like 400 kilometers away from where I stay, and I was teaching the same stuff. But the people I was teaching these things are people who need constant guidance. And therefore, the kind of content I was creating for them, or the lessons I was teaching them, weren't enough for them to be in position to understand everything. So the reason that's why I'm making this series is because I want to show this series to them and make them follow this series so that they can be in position to at least understand Django and have something to refer back to help them follow step by step. So yeah, what is Django? Now, Django is a web framework, one of the most popular web frameworks in the Python programming language. And if you're wondering what a web framework is, it's simply code that other people have written for us to help us be in position to do something. Now, there are very many web frameworks out there, like the Fast APIs of the world and the Django framework and Flask and very many others. But what makes Django sort of like popular is because it was the first ever like full web framework, and I'm going to be explaining what this is. But Django is basically a web framework in Python that is Free and open source, this means it is free to use and you are free to modify it, you are free to contribute to it, and so on. And Django kind of contains most components that you'll need to build web applications. So if you want to have an authentication, Django has some inbuilt functionality to help you build a user authentication. If you want to present or basically manipulate data dynamically on the front end, Django already has an inbuilt way to do that via templates. If you want to handle things like security, there are very many. Okay, so sorry for that. The internet here misbehaved. So let us continue. Hope you guys can still hear me and hear what I say. I know the internet misbehaved for a while, and of course that's to be expected from the country. Oh, so audio is clear. That is good. So let's move forward with the whole presentation. So just like I was saying, Django contains most of the common components that you'll need to have a web application up and running. And I've explained some of the concepts or some of the components that you may need in a normal web application, and Django already has you having all of that so that you can build your entire web application. Now, there are very many things to understand about Django, but one of the most important things to understand is that it is based on the MVT architectural method or architectural pattern, or you can think of it as a way to build applications. There are very many architectural methods or architectural patterns out there, but the MVT and basically what we call MVT are basically what Django is based on. So if you want to understand MVT, you need to just understand that a web app can be comprised of basically three main components. And for this case, we have the models. The models are everything that has to do with the data that you have within your application, that you have within your Django. And they help you be able to define classes and give you an object-oriented way in which you can manage data in your relational database. Now, Django by default was made to be used with relational databases, and what I'm talking about is SQL databases. But you can also use it with MongoDB because of late, I think there's support for MongoDB with Django. For this series, I'll be only talking about relational databases, and if you're new to all that, do not get worried. But relational databases are those which organize information in tables, which can have rows and columns. And those tables can also have things like relationships. And I'll be discussing everything within the series. Views, on the other hand, help you handle requests and responses. If you are new to the internet, well, the internet works in a way that we have servers somewhere that are handling requests from clients. Now, with Django, views are the way to do something like that. You write a view to handle a request to a certain page or a certain endpoint and then get back a response. Templates, on the other hand, are what users see on the front end. So if you visit a page on a Django web application, you are most likely dealing with a template. And these templates are dynamic. There is the templating engine that makes it easy for us to be in position to perform calculations, render data dynamically or conditionally. And I'm going to be discussing all of that. So why choose Django? Of course, you choose Django, first of all, because you know a little bit of Python, want to get into the web application development space. Secondly, you choose Django because it is somehow beginner friendly. Now, the reason that's why I'm saying it is somehow beginner friendly is because even with an understanding of Python, you can still find Django overwhelming, and I'm going to be explaining why. There are very many advanced and intermediate concepts involved when learning the Django web framework, and not everyone who has an understanding of Python can actually just get started with them. Personally, I didn't get started with Django fast, but now I see it is somehow like a requirement for people to get into Django if they want to really get into web development very fast. The next thing that you may choose as a reason for you to learn Django, it is because it can allow you to build very fast. Now, this is because of its nature. It is built with all batteries included, meaning that you have access to all these features and ways of building a web application which are already pre-built and predetermined. So even if you feel stuck, there is a solution to a problem that is already implemented within the framework itself. So if you want to build something very fast, a prototype, it is better to write it in Django because you have all these classes, all these methods, or everything that you may need to implement most functionality. Now, what do we need to get started with this simple series? All you need is an understanding of Python. That will at least be of very much importance to follow along with this series. You'll also need a foundation in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but this is not like a must. You can still not have them because I will be in position to at least give a talk or basically introduce you to what each of these does in a web application. Thirdly, you basically, I think I repeated that sentence from the previous slide, but what you'll need is Python 3.12 plus. You need to install the latest version of Python for you to be on the safer side. I was in Arua the last time where I was teaching students to learn Django, but then most of them had versions 3.9 and below, so they could install Django, but some of the other things would fail, and that's because Django doesn't support those versions. So you need to have version 3.12, 3.13, 3.14. All those will be supported throughout this project series. In addition to what we are seeing here, I also, let me open up my VS Code. I will go ahead and open that up. I have sort of like a simple outline I've made. Of course, I've used AI to help me generate some of the things I'm going to be discussing right here. But this is the basic structure of the entire course, or what I'm going to be talking about. Now, yeah, target audience for this is anyone with some Python programming knowledge, but not Django or web development experience. What you need is basic computer skills and a Python installation. You also need to install things like VS Code and Git. We shall be using these later, but I'm going to be showing you how to install them as we go. Then, yeah, this is going to be a 12-part series, and my plan is to basically discuss this every day. Hopefully, things will go as planned. I want to basically switch on my camera once every day for 12 days to walk you through everything I'm going to be discussing within this series. So for session 1, which is this session, we are going to get started with Django, and our objective is going to be to set up an environment that can help us to be in position to build with Django. I'll introduce web applications, we shall install Django, we shall create our project, and then we shall run our server, which will be basically the end of this tutorial. Then we shall also, for the second session, look at things such as Django apps and projects, which will help us to understand how Django organizes a project. Django has a certain folder structure it follows by default that is necessary to organize how logic is structured within an application. So that's what we shall be also talking about. We shall also be introducing things like views, which are basically functions or classes helping us to handle requests and responses, just like I explained. In the third session, we shall be introducing templates, and we shall also be doing some basic front-end development with HTML and CSS. So we shall be looking at how Django uses templates to dynamically render stuff from the back end. In the first session, we shall cover models and how we can use them to define data or define databases, basically perform CRUD, which is create, read, update, and delete, and all of that stuff. So you do not need to have an understanding of all this. Then we shall also look at that admin interface and shall try to understand how that works, how we can manage data with that, and so on. We shall also look at super users, how we can make basically perform CRUD on our database using the admin. In the sixth session, we shall look at views and how we can use them to manage dynamic pages. Then we shall also look at forms and how they will help us to basically input data or provide some kind of data to our views so that we can perform different requests. User authentication, we shall basically do some basic authentication with okay, hope you guys can hear me. I've removed my microphone, my webcam, because I thought it was leading to some kind of lag or some kind of I hope I am live now. Kindly let me know in the chat because my internet and stream setup is misbehaving right now. All right, so yeah, now I was on relationships and comments, which are basically now these are basically for a simple CRUD form, but I'm not going to be building that. I'm not going to actually be building a blog application. I'm going to be building something else, something a little bit more interesting. Then we shall also look at how we can implement single search and pagination for basically improving the usability of our application. Testing and debugging is where we shall look at basically how to write unit tests and how to print, debug, and all that interesting stuff. And then we shall look at the deployment section where we shall be in position to deploy our application to a cloud provider like Render or AWS or anything. We shall basically pick a deployment service where we can deploy our application to the cloud and make it accessible via the internet. So yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at. Apologizing for all the things that have really gone wrong during the recording of this live stream. Yeah, hope everything is smooth from now onwards. So let's get started. Now, since we've looked at Django and I've basically told you what Django is, the next thing we're going to do is to set up an environment that will allow us to work with the Django web framework. Now, just like I told you, it is going to be important for you to have the latest version of Python. So head over to python.org and download the latest version of Python. Python currently is on around version 3.13 if I'm not mistaken. So if you go to the download section, of course you can download Python 3.13.7, which will then allow us to have Python. So one important thing to understand is that if you have the Python installation, you need to add it to path because that will allow you to be in position to run Python or be in position to have Python run and access, or you can be able to access and run Python anywhere in your system, which makes it easy for you to run scripts. And that is something that Django really needs us to have. So yeah, there are very many guides on how to set that up, but I think I can even show you how to add Python to path. Okay, so yeah, depending on how you're installing Python, hope you guys can still hear me. You are always going to have a screen such as this desired Python installation. There are very many guides. I'm not going to install it because I already have it. But the most important thing, let me check if I actually have the Python installation. If I do have it, then I'll basically show you how to go about installing it. So I do not have it, but one thing I wanted to point out is that if you're installing Python for the very first time, you are always going to have you're always going to have a screen like this. And this screen right here is one on which you will have to select how you're installing your Python. So just like you see down here, you have to just tick add Python to path, and that will add it to path. But there are very many ways you can also add Python to path. You can basically search for your Python installation just if you've installed it already, and then you can open the file location. So when you open the file location, you can copy the file location. After copying this file location right here, I've copied it with Ctrl and C. Then the next thing will be to add it manually to your environment variable. So the way to do that is to search for environment variables. And then you can edit system environment variables. So once that is done, you can go to environment variables, and then you go to this part right here with the variable path. So inside there is where you need to go ahead and add your Python installation. So you can say new and then paste that path and then press OK. So that will add Python to path. So when you press OK this time, then you'll be in position to add Python to your path. So that's exactly what I wanted to show. So the next thing, if you want to confirm if you have Python installed and Python running in your path, you can open up a command prompt or any command line. So let me go ahead and open up CMD for this demo. If you open up CMD, if I type Python, I will then have, so it seems like I don't have Python set up correctly or something. But that's like a common Windows problem. So they also have some way to install Python through the marketplace. I don't know if I write py, I'll be able to see that, which finally works. So I can be in position to access Python by using the py command. Now I don't know why Python won't work, but py will work. So yeah, we have Python installed and we have Python in our path. So once that is done and we have our Python installed and our Python set up, the next thing is going to be to create a Django project or create a virtual environment. So let's start with that. So what I'm going to do is to close most of the stuff I have right here, and then I'm going to come to our Django or VS Code folder right here. I'm going to close the folder that I currently have. I'll be referring to it outside the videos. So for this folder, I'm going to go ahead and What I'm going to do is to open up a new folder within VS Code, and this is going to allow me to have or contain the code that we're going to be using for this project. But then I'll make it a point to add everything we shall cover as notes for future reference. So to start, I'll go to File. So if you haven't used VS Code and you do not have it, please go ahead and install it from code.visualstudio.com. So download the VS Code for your system, because that's what we're going to be using for this playlist or for this guide. Now, once you've downloaded VS Code, there are also going to be some nice things you'll have to have set up, and those are going to be some extensions that will make it easy for you to write both Python and also to work with Django. So my favorite are the Python extensions. So when you open up VS Code, you're always going to find your extensions under this section right here, which is the extensions section or the extensions tab. Inside the extensions tab, you can have your installed extensions show up right here, but you can also search the marketplace and install the extensions you want to be installed. So the first extension you'll need to install is going to be the Python extension. Now what this does is to help you be in position to work well with the Python programming language inside VS Code. VS Code is a text editor, and by default it does not have support for Python. So you'll need to have a way for you to be in position to write code, get better syntax highlighting, be in position to get auto-completion for methods and attributes of objects and all of that interesting stuff. So please go ahead and install the extension. Choose the Microsoft extension. So once you've installed that, it will also come with other things. I think it will come with the debugger and to also install Pylance. So that will be in position to add that to your system. Once you've installed those two, the next you'll install are going to be the following. So I have the black formatter. So the black formatter will make it easy for you to format your Python code so that it is at least compliant to some of the standards of Python using black. So to remove unnecessary spaces, to space your code out well, it will fix long lines and all of that stuff. Then you also need to have Django. So I've been using this small extension for some time now, and I've actually really liked it for one thing. So this is the Django extension right here, and what it does is to help you be in position to write or autocomplete some of the boring stuff you do when you are using Django template. So using Django, you get access to all tags and all special filters and all of that stuff when using templates. We shall look at how to use it, but for now, please go ahead and download it. It's going to be extremely helpful for you. Hoping that everything is still going great. All right, so yeah, to continue, what you're going to do is to now install Django. So the first thing when you're starting a Python project is where it's going to be the virtual environment. So I'm going to keep this readme.md within this folder because I don't want to create another folder. But if you're starting this project from scratch, the first thing you'll need to do is to open up a folder, which you're going to do in your VS Code by going to the file section or the file. So VS Code will look like this for you. If you haven't magnified in a lot, you'll have a bunch of options right here. But if I magnify, I will then have this VS Code open right here, but then I'll have to go right in here, go to file, and then I'll select a new folder, which will then open up my file explorer and enable me to create a folder which I can then open up to be in position to work with on my project. So if I wanted to select the current folder I'm in, I'll navigate to the document section right here and then go to Django series for beginners, and then I'll select that folder which is already opened right here. But for your case, what you'll need to do is to basically open up a new folder, create the folder, name the folder, and then open it up in VS Code for you to have this kind of setup. So once you've been able to do that, then virtual environments will be the way to start. So I'm going to be discussing what virtual environments are, and I want to make it as simple as possible. Virtual environments allow us to have isolated Python installations or isolated Python environments that are specific to specific projects that we are working on. Now, those are, of course, Python projects. Whenever you create a Python project, you may want to have a separate environment that is going to isolate your project dependencies, isolate your Python packages from those that may be in other projects or from those that may be installed on your system. Now, this is Windows, and it's not common for Windows to have a default Python installation. But for operating system like Mac or Linux, you are most likely going to have a Python installation that is installed system-wide. And therefore, you may have some system utilities that are going to depend on that Python installation. So if you install Python or install packages or Python libraries to that Python installation, you are most likely to mess up system-wide dependencies. So it's always advised to start with a virtual environment. In 2025, there are very many ways to create a virtual environment, but for this video or this series, we're going to be using Venv, which is an inbuilt way to create such virtual environments. Now, let us create a virtual environment and I show you how that basically works. So to start, you're going to type the following command. We're going to open up a new terminal by pressing Ctrl and J on your Windows machine, or I think this even works on Mac and Linux. So the Mac guys can press maybe Command J. But when you press Command J on your machine, that will open up this section right here, which is the terminal right here. Do not worry if you have never used the command line before. But what this section does is to allow you input commands into the computer, which will then help you be in position to run some things or tell the computer what to do, and the computer will execute those in real time. All right, so yeah, now that we've been able to open up our terminal, the next thing we're going to do is to provide the command that's going to be necessary for us to create a virtual environment. And for us to do that, we're going to write Python or Py because Python failed to run as a command. In fact, if I run it again, I'm not sure if it will go ahead and run. It will just try to redirect us to this screen. But if I typed Py, now CLS is the command to go ahead and clear my terminal. But if I typed pi, now I can access Python, which is Python 3.13.7. If I exit out of that, I have to just press Ctrl Z and then press enter to exit out of that interactive shell. So yeah, now let's get started. To create a virtual environment, what we're going to do is to type pi. So this is going to be for Python on your system. Some guys will have to type it as Python. Well, for us, we shall go ahead and type it as pi. So when you type pi or Python, then you have to follow it with -m. So what this does is to basically run or basically execute a library or a package as a command. So in this case, we want to refer to the inbuilt package, which is venv for our case. If I type venv, then I have to specify which folder in which this virtual environment can exist. Now you are free to call this whatever you want. I'm going to keep it to env, but you can still call this app env just to keep the env because it helps you to at least understand that that's a virtual environment. Now if we say app env, or let's just call this app env, that will create a new folder which is going to be called app env within our current empty folder. And that's where our virtual environment is going to be located. Okay, so I'm being told my audio is not loud enough, which is funny given that I have tried to fix it very many times. Now, do not worry, let me try to fix that. I'm not that much of a Windows user, and I've also had some graphics problem from the Linux side. So that's why I am a little bit disorganized for this live stream, but you guys will forgive me for that. Okay, so I've set up the volume for this at 100. I have set up the volume for the microphone at 100. I have set up quite a lot of things, but still, the audio doesn't seem clear enough. I'm using the right microphone. Let me try to see if I have some things I still have to set up. Even the gain itself is high. I wonder if you guys can still hear me well. I don't know if this is like the volume adjustment I have to make. What's the difference here? I don't know if you guys can really notice a difference in the audio. Is that audio good enough? You can update me down in the live chat. So yeah. All right, so let's continue. So we've created a simple virtual environment in here. And this virtual environment is a folder called app.env or app.env. So this is what we're going to be using to isolate our system-wide or our project installation of Python from that we have in our system. Now, this is going to be very important because it's going to allow us to be in position to have all the dependencies we're going to have for our project be only isolated to that specific project. No other project will access the same dependencies, and that is very important. So let's look at what is inside this folder. When I open up this folder, we're going to have a bunch of files. We have include, we have lib, we have scripts. We also have a .ignore file and a pyvenv.config. Now, I want you to basically understand one folder or look at one folder, and that's going to be the scripts folder. So this script folder is going to have a bunch of executable files or files we can run directly. What these files can do is to allow us to access most of the defaults we need, or most of the executables we're going to be needing, or those that are going to be available each time we install or each time we set something up within our project. For example, we have the activate script or the activate command right here, which is actually an executable script. What this does is to activate our virtual environment to allow us to use that instead of the Python system-wide Python installation. We have that in very many versions. We have the activate.bat, activate.fish, activate.psi, but all those, which is actually PS1, all those help us to just activate our virtual environment so that we can be in position to then install packages and use only that isolated environment. Then we have deactivate. So what deactivate does is to give us the ability to deactivate or stop using a virtual environment. So after creating a virtual environment like what we've done here, we need to activate it. Then we can build whatever we are building, and after building we can then deactivate that virtual environment, which is actually what you do with the deactivate.bat script. We also have things like pip. So pip is the package manager that Python uses by default to install dependencies. So that can also be pip 3.13. We have also pip 3, but all of those are just ways to help you use pip. Then we have python.exe, which is basically one to allow you be in position to use the Python interpreter. So if we activated our virtual environment to use this, we can come and say py, or we can actually go ahead and say, I was trying to write source, but I'm on Windows, so I have to go ahead and write env, which I actually called app env. So this works with backslashes, so you have to provide a backslash, and then you have to provide the name of the folder in which that command is. So for our case, we want to go ahead and use the activate scripts right here. So that means you have to start from the folder which is app env, followed by the backslash, which is going to lead us to scripts, followed by the backslash that's going to then lead us to activate. The beauty about this is if I type app env and tab, or if I type app env, the backslash and tab, then I can sort of cycle through all the available folders. So that gives me access to scripts. And I type another backslash. For my case now, I can be in position to access the activate script or the activate command. So yeah, if I type activate, that will then show us that our virtual environment has been activated. Now, the thing is, whenever a virtual environment has been activated, you're going to have this little indicator right here that's going to just show you that you've now switched from your Python of the system to the Python that is for this virtual environment. So yeah, if I type py, now this is going to be our little Python installation. On Linux, you're going to have commands like which will show you which specific Python installation you're going to be using. But for our case, if we go ahead and try to maybe say where, I think that's the command on Windows. So if we say where and then we type py, that will show us. So this is going to actually show this path right here. I think that's like the path to that. I don't know why it doesn't point to this path, but yeah, there is a command that helps you to search or be in position to confirm what specific executable you are using. But for now, we've activated our virtual environment. So to deactivate a virtual environment, you're just going to type deactivate, and that will get you out of the virtual environment, meaning you are no longer using the virtual environment, the Python installation you set up for that virtual environment, as well as the packages you set up for that virtual environment. So I'm going to clear that up, and then we shall activate again with env scripts, which are actually called app env. So I'll say app env slash scripts and then slash activate. So yeah, that's going to be activating our virtual environment. So now that we've at least had an understanding of what a virtual environment is, how to create one, let's go ahead and now look at how we can go ahead to install Django. So to install Django, we're going to be making use of the pip command, which I've already shown you exists within our scripts right here. And that is also activated. So we can type pip directly, and then we can confirm that pip is installed, since we can be in position to see all the available commands and sub commands as well as options we can pass to pip. So now we can go ahead and install Django by using pip. So what I'm going to be doing is to use CLS to clear my terminal, and then I'll come right here and say pip install Django. So that will go ahead and install Django for us to start then start to use. So So you are most likely to get a faster installation depending on which tool you are using to install Django, or how fast your internet is. And now, since you are using pip, we have to wait for some minutes for Django to be installed, because pip takes quite a lot of time to install packages, and my internet is not the best. All right, seems like our Django has now been installed. So once Django is installed, the next thing we're going to do is to now try to explore what comes with Django. So I'm going to clear my simple CMD right here with CLS. And once I've cleared that, the next thing to do is to then check out, so we can get curious and still find out what is then installed within our Django installation. So if I come back to our PNV right here, we can now notice that under our lib, we have a bunch of stuff that has been added. So we can go ahead and create a file that's going to allow us to keep specific version of things that have been added to our virtual environment. And for us to do that, I'm going to run a command called pip freeze. So what this does is to go ahead and allow us to view all the versions of the installed Python packages. But what we want is to go ahead and freeze to a file. And there is this special syntax right here with this greater than sign that points to a file. So this file is going to be the requirements.txt file. When we do that, what we're doing is to run pip freeze, but redirect all the output of that command to requirements.txt. Now, I'm using Ctrl J to open and close the terminal. So if you're wondering how fast I'm doing it, that's the way I'm doing it. Now to cipher a file, I can do Ctrl P and then search the name of the file. So what I want to do is to view my requirements.txt. So under the requirements.txt, or inside the requirements.txt, we now have all the packages we've installed as well as their specific versions. Now this is very important because when you work on these projects, you're going to find yourself having to maybe run them in the future when these packages have been updated or something of that sort. So it's always important that you get to have specific versions of those recorded in a file like this, which you can then use to install with pip using a command like pip install and then -r requirements.txt. So that is the command that helps you to get the project and install all the requirements as written in the requirements.txt file. So once that is done, we can now go ahead and look at Django admin. Now, once you've installed Django, the scripts folder is still going to be populated with some commands. So the first we shall see is the Django admin executable or command, and we shall also see another one called SQL format. So most of our focus is going to be on the Django admin command. So this command is going to be made for us available in our terminal, in our virtual environment. So all we have to do is to just call it directly. I'm going to collapse that. If you're wondering how I'm opening and closing this, I'm using Ctrl B, which is basically open and close the file explorer. So if I press Ctrl B, that will help me to open and close a file explorer, and then I can pull up my terminal with Ctrl J once again. Ctrl C to stop, and then Ctrl or CLS to clear the terminal. So that's how I'm going to be working. I hope you guys find it interesting. So what I'm going to be doing now is to run a command called Django admin. So what this does is to go ahead and show us all the commands that come with this command. So if you run Django admin, this is something that is made available to us by Django when we install it within our virtual environment. So the Django admin command is one that helps us to basically run commands to manage our Django project. You can think of it as a command line utility that Django gives you by default. And what that does is to help you be in position to manage your project by running very many commands and also sub commands. Now, if you are kind of confused about what those commands are, you can just basically read this simple documentation that has been provided right here. One important thing to note is that you'll see the label Django on all of these commands. So these are commands that are specific to managing Django. But then we can also be in position to have other commands that will be for those apps we shall install. I've not talked about apps yet, but I'm going to be talking about all of that. So the first command we're going to need is going to be the Django admin start app or start project command. And this is what will help us to sort of bootstrap an empty Django project. So that's exactly what we're going to be using. I'm going to go ahead and clear my terminal. And if I run Django-admin start project, then I can say --help. That will, of course, open up the documentation for that specific command, allowing us to understand what that does. Now, just like you can see right here, that tells us that this creates a Django project directory structure for the given project name in the current directory, or optionally a given directory. So that means you can use this command to help us create a Django project within this folder. And what happens is it will first of all create the folder that we specify, and it will also basically take in where we want to create that folder as another argument we want to create it. So the way we run that command is to basically go ahead and say Django-admin and then start project, and then we can point to a folder. Now, I don't know about you, you can call your project folders whatever you want, but I always prefer to call it core Why? Because core is a name that I can at least use that is very easy for me to understand that this is the core or this is the root of the entire project. Now, when I run this command, Django admin start project core, what this is going to do is to create a new folder called core within my empty folder right here. And this is also going to have another folder called core that is going to contain some files in here and also a manage.py Python file. Now this can work, but what I want is to have the manage.py file be at the same level as my entire project folder. The reason as to why I want to do that is because it is easy for me to kind of point a web server, that's if I'm deploying the app, to that specific file right there. So yeah, to fix that, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And once I've deleted it, I'll then rerun the command. And once I rerun the command, this time I'm going to go ahead and run the command, but I will put a dot at the end of the command. So our command now is Django admin start project core and then dot. What that is going to do is to allow us to be in position to create that project within the same root project, which is going to help us be in position to have all our project located at the root of the project structure, making it easy for us to run our app. Now, if I press enter, our project will be created. And if we're to go back to our root folder right here, we're going to have our virtual environment app env. We shall have our core folder right here. We shall have a manage.py file, which I'm going to be explaining, and then we shall have the requirements.txt. Now, the readme.md is a file I've created myself, so please do not worry about it. So that's going to be our entire project folder right here. Let me just have something to drink here. Meanwhile, you can tell me where you're from, where you're watching this from, and how you're finding the entire session or the entire episode or series. All right, so now that we've created our project, let's just have a brief recap of what we've done so far. We've so far opened up a new folder within our VS Code. We've created a virtual environment, which is simply an isolated environment for our Python installation to be, so that we can at least separate our Python installed packages for our project, or those that are specific to our project, from those that may be installed system-wide or within our system installation or the installation of Python we installed on our machine. We then proceeded to look at the scripts folder and what it contains, and we went ahead and looked at how to activate our virtual environment and deactivate that virtual environment. We then installed Django, and once we installed Django, we introduced the Django admin command that allowed us to then go ahead and create a Django project. So yeah, we now have a Django project created. So to start, I'm going to be giving you a tour of the Django project, or the folder that Django calls the Django project, and I'll explain what that is and how it works and how Django organizes its folder or its folder structure or project structure. To start, I'm going to open this folder right here, and the first thing you'll notice is you're going to have the danda-init.py file. Now if you to look at this file, there's nothing that's going to be inside the file. Now these are just suggestions that are provided by GitHub Copilot, an AI tool that I'm currently not using. I disabled it for this video. But you can think of this file as one that Python allows you to have so that you can prevent, or actually not prevent, I'm kind of getting lost here. What this file does in a Python folder is to allow you be in position to access other files or other modules within that folder. So if you have a folder like core, we can then be in position to import stuff from that folder inside other files. So that means that if we're outside, we could be able to access all these files as well as any objects or functions or anything defined inside this file. So that's what that does. It is Python way of marking a folder as a package so that we can access different folders or different Python files within that specific folder. Another thing to look at is the asgy.py, or what they pronounce as ASCII. So this is a file that is used to run a web server, but this is specifically an async web server. I'm not going to go so deep into what this file does because that's so much out of scope for this video, but you can just think of it as an alternative way to run a web server, or to basically expose our application as an object which we can then run with a web server. I'm going to go ahead and close that. The next file we're going to be looking at is the most important file, and that is going to be the settings.py file. So the settings.py file is a file you're always going to be working with, and what this file does is to have, or basically be, a central point for all your Django configurations. If there's anything you're going to be configuring within your Django project, you're most likely going to be doing inside the settings.py file. So it's very important that you familiarize yourself with whatever happens in this file, because it's going to be one you're going to be working with most of the times. So I'm going to be explaining briefly what each of this does, and then we shall look at the functionalities of each of the settings once we progress within the series. So to start, we're going to begin with this simple variable right here. One thing to note is that each variable you see in Python that is written in an uppercase form is a constant. Therefore, base.da is a constant that doesn't really change and is used throughout the entire project. So base.da basically points to this root project folder right here, the one in which we have all our application. It is basically one that is created with pathlib, and pathlib is simply an object-oriented way to refer to paths or manipulate paths in Python. If we're to look at this, what this does is to basically find the current file. So path current file basically refers to the path to settings.py, and then .resolve.parent basically points to the parent of this file. If you're to look at this part right here, you will notice that the parent folder to settings.py is core, or the core folder. And then if we want to access the parent of this file, we'll then have to have .parent, which is actually referring to where the core folder is, which is our root project folder. So base.da is simply an object to refer to where our current project is located, and it's going to be very useful because Django kind of uses that to set up some paths for some specific settings. Then we have the secret key constant. The secret key constant is this very special variable that Django uses for things that are encryption related. So just like you can see right here, it's very important to keep the secret key secret in a production setting. If you haven't heard of what production is, It's basically when your app is live, and you're always going to be here in terms like production, and you're going to always hear things like development. If you hadn't heard of this, when an app is in production, it is live and is being used by some users. If it's in development, that's when you are actually working on it or developing it. So that's basically what they mean by that. So this warning just tells us to always find ways to keep this secret key secret so that hackers cannot be in position to access it, because they can be able to do quite a lot of stuff in our Django app if they have access to it. Next, we have the debug setting. The debug setting is one that is very necessary because it helps us to basically tell Django to either show errors or not show them. Have you ever accessed an application and then seen something like internal server error, but they do not provide the details of what is happening at the server side? Now, in Django, you can think of debug equals true as one that will help you see what exactly went on. And if we turn this to false, this is a Boolean constant. If we turn it to true, we are showing errors. If we turn it to false, then no errors are ever going to be shown. So this is very important because it kind of keeps the details to our application secret, making it difficult for hackers to hack our app. That's when it is in production. But in development, it is going to always be true because we have to use Django's inbuilt ways of showing us errors and showing us the exact tracebacks where those errors are. So that's exactly what we have right here. So this security warning also tells you to not run with debug turned on in production. So you always have to turn it to false. Then allowed hosts is going to be a list of URLs or addresses on which your application may run. So we shall not go ahead to describe that, but I'll describe it when we reach the part of development of deployment. Yeah, next is going to be a very important section, and that's the installed apps section. So Django works in the following way. You have a project. So a project is simply a folder, and under a project you have multiple apps. So let's say app 1, and then we can have app 2. So when you have app 1 is basically code for some logic or some functionality, and then you have app 2, which is basically code for some other logic or some functionality. But all these are going to have specific folders shared among them. So for example, you'll have things like URLs or URL patterns, you'll have things like forms, you'll have things like database models, you'll have things like views, and all of that stuff. And all that is going to be specific to some entity or specific to some module that you want to implement. So Django basically organizes a folder structure in projects and apps, a project being the main entry point to the entire application or the entire project. So what a project is simply a bunch of configurations and settings that then these apps plug into. For example, if we create app 1, which is like for, let's say, student logic, or let's say product logic. Let's say this is going to be for products. We can then plug it into this project and unplug it and use it in another project. All it does is to just be in position to plug it inside. And the way we plug it inside the project is to simply register it. So if we had an app called products, we'll then just come right here and add it to the end of the list. And that will be then registered to work with our current project. Now, if we proceed, we then can have other apps. So let's say this is the authentication app. The authentication app can have all files or all modules related to the authentication functionality. And if we wanted to add that to our project, we then register it by just adding it at the end of the installed apps list. So that's going to be our authentication. So yeah, that's basically how the installed apps list works. One thing to note is for our installed apps list, we already have some defaults in there. Now you may ask yourself what these are, but they are Django specific apps that Django has created to allow us to be in position to work with Django by default. So I'm going to be explaining what each of these does, but I'm not going to be going so much into detail about them. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to see right here is the Django.contrib.admin app. What this is the Django admin. So Django by default ships with it an admin panel, an admin dashboard that is very necessary to help us be in position to manage our database at a high level. So we can be able to manage our database, be in position to, let me first plug in my laptop. So we can interact with our database via an admin dashboard, and that functionality is already made accessible to us through the Django admin. So that's the Django.contrib.admin. Django also by default provides for us basic authentication functionality, and most of that is found within an app called Django.contrib.auth. So everything from logging in to signing up to changing password is going to be available by default, but all that is made necessary by this Django.contrib.auth app. Then Django.contrib.content types has something to do with content types. I'm not going to go so deep into that. Then sessions, basically Django allows us to have some persistent storage for things. I'll be describing that within this series, or we may not even discuss it. But what sessions are basically ways we can keep some persistent of some objects so that we can use them in other ways. And yeah, that's how I can explain them. But you can think of it as storages for certain variables or certain data that you may need to use. Then another app is going to be the Django.contrib.messages app. What this does is to help us be in position to display messages or informative messages for actions that users perform within the application. This may be good if you want to show users feedback in case an action has been completed successfully, or in case it has failed, or in case there's an error. Such messages are very important. Then the last app is going to be the static files app. Now this is what allows us to manage static files. If you are confused about what those are, they are basically files that do not change. Now those can be things like images, things that are not dynamic. We can have JS, which is JavaScript. Then we can also have things like files. We can have things like images, JS. We can have images, JavaScript, CSS, and so on. So those are some of the apps that Django provides, but the static files app is one that comes to help us manage such files. Next, we have middleware. So you can think of middleware as functionality that is to be run in between a request and a response. And I'm not going to be going so deep into this, but Django comes with inbuilt middleware to help us be able to perform different things. So this can be security middleware, session middleware, and all the other things. Now we're going to be talking so much about this because that is not a beginner topic. But I'll maybe explain these when we get to things like authentication. So I'll go ahead and close that. Then root URL conf, this basically points to the module in which our project level URLs are going to be found. Now, one thing I told you about is that for each folder or app we shall create, we shall plug into our project. So each app is going to have things like URLs, which are basically paths on which we access different parts of our application. But those are going to be defined within apps. So apps will have specific app URLs. And once we've created them, then we need to register them in a global root URL file. And that's going to be the core urls.py. So once you've done all your URLs, you then go ahead and just add them onto this URL patterns list. But we also see that Django by default has the admin site added in here. So that means we already have our admin URLs, and I'm going to be showing you how to access that. So yeah, root URL conf, that points to our core.url. So the name that you provided as your project name, then the URLs module. Templates is basically a list of all configurations related to how we set up templates. One thing we see is the template backend that basically points to how Django is going to manage our templates. Next, we're going to see how we want to structure our directories for templates. So if we create a folder within our folder structure right here that is not inside an app, we can point to that folder and simply add it in here. But we always have to point to the base directory. So if we're adding, let's say base-templates, that will help us to go ahead and then define that other templates are going to be found in base-templates. But the thing is, Django by default will store all our templates within a specific app. And if you are confused about what apps and projects are, I'm going to be talking about that in the next video. So please subscribe and you'll be in position to see me explain what apps are. So yeah, this is going to be empty by default. And what this means is we can create any templates folders or a folder called templates in any of the apps we shall create, and Django will automatically get to use all the template files we describe in there. So app does is true. Options, we have context processors. So context processors are basically ways we can define data that's going to be accessed throughout our entire templates. And that is very important if you have things like notifications, but you want all those to be accessed via all the entire app. So you can define variables and make them access via the entire app. And that's what context processors do. So WSGI application or WSGI application is a special file or is a special object that points to what is going to be run by the web server. So if you see core.wsgi.application, it basically points to a file called wsgi.py because that's how it's pronounced, but it's wsgi.py. So what this has is a specific object called application, and that's what they are accessing right here when they say core.wsgi.application. So it's always just important to leave that unedited because Django already sets it up for you, but it's just a way to refer to the current application or what Django is going to be running as an application. Next is going to be the database section. So the database setting allows us to define which database we're going to be using. Now the beauty about Django is that by default, it doesn't really tie us to a database server of some sort. All it does is to provide for us an SQLite 3 backend to help us work with a file-based database, and I'm going to be showing how that works. Next is going to be auth password validator. So in case we want to go ahead and write some functionality for how we may want to validate passwords, we may just write it and then register it here using this list of dictionaries called password validators or auth password validators. Then the language code, this is basically language time zone specific things. So here you can use UTC. If I wanted to change this to my current location, I can say Africa/Kampala or /Kenya or whatever time zone you are in. Use internationalization is true. That's if you want to have some translation. I use time zone true. And then, yeah, these are basically time zone internationalization specific settings. Then static URL, this is the URL that is going to be used by Django to access static files. So if you have CSS files, JavaScript files, images, all those will be accessed via this /static URL, and I'll be showing you how to use that in the following videos. Then default autofield is a specific constant or variable that Django is going to help determine what kind of or what type is going to be used for the default primary keys we shall have on each database table we shall create. And we now see that it's using db.models.bigAutofield, which is basically one way to refer to a very large integer field. So this can start from 1 and go to millions, but it's auto incremented. That's what it basically means. But you can feel free to change it to whatever you want. And I'm not going to be showing you that because, of course, this is a beginner tutorial. So yeah, you're always going to be tampering with this file. You'll have to add things to this file. And for now, we're just okay understanding that this file is just the main settings file for our entire project. Next, in our core, this is going to be our core folder. It's going to be the URL. So just like I explained, this is where we register all app-specific URLs. So when you create a module or an app called products, we define URLs inside that app, and then we come and register them inside this urls.py. If we then go to wsgi.py, or what I call wsgi.py, inside here is where you basically have Django's way of looking for the entire application. So what this does is to, first of all, be in position to determine where our settings are. So Django settings module is an environment variable that is set to our settings.py right here. And then Django will create an application instance that will be then used to run our app using the WSGI. So I think I'll have to create a video about WSGI versus ASGI, but these are just basically ways to implement a web server in Python. WSGI being the synchronous and ASGI being the asynchronous gateway interface to allow things like use of async web servers. All right, now once you understand what is going on in the core folder or your project folder, you're then going to proceed to the manage.py folder. In the manage.py folder, we basically have a file that's going to be necessary for us to execute command line stuff. For example, if I pulled up my terminal with Ctrl and J, and I'm going to clear it and run py, or I think this time I can run Python. Yeah, I can run Python within our virtual environment. So I'll press Ctrl and Z and enter to exit out of there. And once I've done that, if I go ahead and run Python mani.py, this time I'm going to see a bunch of commands. Now, there's a difference between Django admin and Python mani.py, because Django admin tends to only provide for us commands specific to Django, but then Python mani.py allows us to see Django commands as well as app specific commands. So let me make the comparison. If I say Django-admin, this time we're only going to see Django specific apps. In fact, you can even see the label Django and all the commands that are under that label. So those are just for managing a Django app. But when you run Python mani.py, this time you're going to see the Django label right here. So those are the Django specific commands. And you're also going to have other commands that are going to come as a result of the default apps that are installed on a Django application by default. For example, the admin, the auth, content types, and all of that stuff. So if we were to go back here, you'll then see the auth app has change password and create super user. So we shall look at what these commands do. Content types, remove stale content types, and then we have all the Django specific commands. And then under sessions, we shall see clear sessions, and we have those that are specific to the static files app. So have collect static and find static and then run server. So yeah, we are now good to go. We have created our app. We've discussed what we've actually created a simple project, and we've looked at things like creating a virtual environment. We have created a Django project. We've discussed what is found within a Django project folder. Now let's go ahead and run our server. To run our server, we can do it in two ways. We can use the Django admin command, since we've now discovered that it contains the run server command. If I go to Django admin, we now see, am I mistaken? I'm not mistaken, it has the Django admin run server command. But we can also be in position to see the same command. If I say python money.py, we also have the run server command. We actually have it in two places. We have it in the, so we have it here in, I think I saw it in the static files app. So let's try to run that. If you say python money.py run server, we can then enter. And the first thing we shall notice is we have a bunch of logs inside here. So if we're to check out what these logs are, we are told that watching for files changes, restart, reload that. So there's some reloading that will happen each time we make changes to our files. And we also have something that is checking if we have some issues. So there's some cases in which you make mistakes and Django will be able to stop the server, but it will warn you about what exactly is happening. So those are the checks it will throw there. Then we see a warning right here that's telling us that we have 18 unapplied migrations. Let's ignore that for now. We shall get there. Then next we shall see the date, the Django version we're using, where our settings are located, as well as where our development server is running from. So for our case, our Django server is running on this IP address 127.0.0.1 colon 8000, which basically specifies the port, which is 8000. If we add, follow this link by pressing Ctrl and click, we can now go to our browser. I think that didn't work, so let me do it once again. And now we shall see that we have this screen right here showing us that our Django has been installed and it works successfully. And the reason that's why we are seeing this message is because debug is set to true in our settings and we have not configured any URLs. But what if we set debug to false? So let's go back to our settings.py and let's first of all try to look at what is going to happen. So the first thing we're going to do, we now see it's showing us get request made to that root URL and it's returning 200. But if we set debug to false, what is actually going to happen? So this time you set debug allowed host if debug is false. So we have to specify some files in there or some allowed hosts, so it will not run. But we shall look at why that happens when we reach the deployment section. So yeah, let's go ahead and try to run our server with debug mode. So if we turn debug mode off, we shall look at allowed host, which I do not plan on showing you right now. But what is going to happen is if we run our server again, we can now be in position to show this screen right here. So I think at this point I have accomplished what I wanted for this specific session. And yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed this live stream. Please like, please subscribe, please share this live stream to anyone you think wants to get started with the Django web framework. I'll catch you guys tomorrow, same time. Hope this time I'll have no issues with internet and audio and all of those things. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate. Have a good day. Bye.